Welcome to the Canadian edition of The Gospel Truth with Andrew Womack, a teaching ministry that focuses on God's unconditional love and grace.
Teachings that you have invested in me has produced healing and relationship with God in my life. So I'm just eternally grateful to you and to your ministry.
And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to our Friday's broadcast of The Gospel Truth. Today is the end of my second week of teaching verse by verse through the book of Hebrews, and we have made a brand new product. This is a 223-page hardback copy, and I'm using my computer because I have written a digital commentary on the entire Bible. I've covered over 27,000 verses in the Bible, and we've taken the footnotes that I've written over the book of Hebrews and put them into this edition right here. So this is a printed copy of this digital living commentary, and this is powerful. I tell you, if Hebrews isn't one of your favorite books, you don't fully understand the new covenant and what Jesus did for you. So we've now come to the fourth chapter of Hebrews, and I started on this yesterday. Yesterday is kind of an introduction to what I'm going to talk about today. Again, you can go to our website, you can watch yesterday's program, you can get these materials, but you need to get this in its context. Hebrews chapter 4 is one of the most important things that God ever showed me about there being a rest, a Sabbath rest for the people of God. And even down in verse 11, Hebrews 4:11, it says, let's labor to enter into this rest. Most people, that just is like contradictory. If you're going to rest, you don't labor to rest. You just lay down and rest. But see, this isn't talking about a physical rest. It's not talking about because you're tired you want to rest. This is talking about how that God created the heavens and the earth on the first 6 days of creation. He created Adam and Eve at the very end of that, and they immediately entered into a rest. Genesis chapter 2, verse 2 says God rested on the seventh day, not because He was tired, but because He had done everything so perfectly, there was nothing to do. He anticipated every need that Adam and Eve would ever have. He didn't have to create food for them when they got hungry. He had already done it. He didn't have to create air for them to breathe. He had already anticipated that. He already anticipated the perfect climate. Everything that they would ever need was already created. And that's not only for Adam and Eve. Did you know that God anticipated everything that the human race would ever need? Boy, this is not believed today. This is where all of this environmentalism and climate change and all of these kind of things, people think that we're destroying the earth and that we're running out of resources, and that stuff is not true. Man, I don't want to spend the whole program on this, but that is wrong. And that really comes from people who don't understand that God anticipated everything that Adam and Eve would ever need, and they had already created it in an abundance for them. Likewise, He's anticipated everything that the world will ever need. We've now got close to 8 billion people on this planet. It doesn't matter if we have 24 billion people on this planet. God has anticipated whatever our needs are, and there is a way to meet every single need that the world has. Nothing catches God by surprise. He created everything so perfectly that He rested. He doesn't have to make more resources because we're depleting them. You know, I've actually seen people that have taken water and have made a combustible engine and have driven a car over 100,000 miles on water. Water is the most abundant resource that we have on this planet. We've been using fossil fuels, and there's enough fossil fuels in the United States alone to keep the earth going for the next 100 years at the present rate that we're burning fossil fuels and never run out. But even if we run out of fossil fuels, you could use water. There's a way to do it. We may not have it perfected yet, but there is no shortage of what God has supplied. There's just a shortage of us recognizing it. So anyway, I don't want to spend my whole program on that, but God's anticipated everything that we would ever need, and then He rested, and we enter into His rest. Now, I've been talking about physical things, but there's also a spiritual rest. to where we quit trying to get God to heal us, to prosper us, to bless us, to deliver us. We recognize through Jesus that He's already provided everything we'll ever need, and it's not out there someplace. It's inside of us. You're already healed, 1 Peter 2:24. You're already blessed, Ephesians chapter 1, verse 3. That God has already abounded towards us in all blessings. It's done. The supply of God's not out there, it's in us, and we just have to rest and draw out what is already ours. It is so much easier to get something, let me say it this way, it's so much easier to release what you believe you already have than it is to try and go get something that you don't have. You know, if you had bought groceries, and you remember that you had these groceries, but maybe you misplaced them. They weren't in the place that you normally put them, but you know you've got them. That's different than a person that doesn't know if they have the groceries, the fruit, or whatever that they need. And so they just may not see it in the first moment, and so they have to go and they have to get more. But if you knew that you already had it, you'd look in a different place and you'd keep looking until you find it. It's different to take advantage of something that you know that you have instead of believing that there's something that exists, but you have to go get it. You know, if I said that over on the other side of this table is healing, and I'm going to get there, well, something could happen. You know, I could try and get up, maybe fall and never make it to the other side of this table. Maybe somebody else would come and tackle me, or they'd hold me in this chair and I never made it to the other side of this table. But if I say, no, it's not there, it's not something I'm going to get, I've already got it. It's right here. That in this chair is healing. Well, then how can I doubt that I'll get what I've already got? You know, I had an instance when I first got started in ministry. I had just come out of Vietnam. I had just gotten married. The Bible that I had was all mildewed. I had marked it up so much, pages had fallen out, entire chapters of the Bible were gone. And I was pastoring a church, and I didn't even have a full Bible. It had mildew all over it, smelled bad. And I wanted to get a new Bible, but I was so poor that I couldn't buy a Bible. I couldn't come up with an extra $20. And it took me, I don't remember how long, but 5 or 6 months for me to come up with $20 extra so that I could go get a Bible. I know some of you think I'm exaggerating things, but Jamie and I would go 2 weeks without food. And I mean, when we said we had nothing, we had nothing. And it took me about, months to get enough money to go buy a Bible. But when I bought it, I had my name engraved on it. I walked out of that Bible bookstore with a Bible under my arm, and I quit doubting that I'd get it once I had it. Prior to that time, Satan just gave me a lot of grief and said, some great man of God you are. You don't even have a whole Bible. You can't even believe for enough money to go get a Bible. How could you ever believe for a person to be saved, healed, delivered, set free? And I mean, during my waking hours, I probably never went longer than 10 minutes without some thought coming about, man, you don't even have a Bible. You can't do it. You're a failure. But did you know, as soon as I got that Bible and walked out, all of those doubts left. And people look at me and think, well, of course, why would you doubt that you'd get it if you've got it? That's my point. You know why? You pray and say, Father, I believe that I'm healed. And then you have a doubt and you start having to fight these doubts. It's because you don't believe you've already got it. You believe it's available. You believe if you do everything right, maybe God will heal you. But see, you aren't resting in what He's already done. God has already healed you. And instead of trying to do something to get healing, it's a matter of resting in the fact that by His stripes I was healed. And you know, it says in Hebrews chapter 4, verse 4, it likens it to the rest that God took, not because He was tired, but because it was done. It was complete. It is finished. So let me go back and use the Sabbath as an example of what this is talking about. In Colossians chapter 2 and in verse 16, it says, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. There's 5 things listed here. And then verse 17 says, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. So there's 5 things listed, and verse 17, Colossians 2:17 says these 5 things are shadows of things to come. You know what a shadow is? A shadow is some kind of a symbolism, something that gives you, it's an analogy, something that looks forward to something else. It's not the reality, it's just a shadow, a picture, a type, a shadow of something to come. Imagine that this table right here, or where my computer is, that this was a column that was tall enough, and you were standing over there and I was standing over here. You couldn't see me because there was like this building or something in the way. You couldn't see me, but the light would be shining so that you could see my shadow. So if you could see around the corner and see my shadow is very beneficial. It could tell you a lot of things if you can't see me. It could tell you whether I'm standing still, whether I'm walking away from you, or whether I'm walking towards you. It could tell you if I was carrying a club or if I was carrying something. If you can't see me, then a shadow gives you a lot of information. But if I was to walk around the corner and be in full view of you, and if you went up and tried to shake hands with my shadow, or if you went up and tried to hug my shadow, I'd think you're crazy. A shadow only is of benefit when the reality, the person, isn't there. Once the person comes, you don't look at the shadow, you look at the reality. And this says that these 5 things were shadows of a reality that was yet to come. So look at this. Verse 16 talks about these 5 things. The first thing it mentions is don't let them judge you in meat. This is talking about the dietary laws of the Old Testament. And I could spend a lot of time on that, but basically, there's many animals in the sea, like oysters, like crabs, like anything that didn't have fins to it. You couldn't eat. You couldn't eat clams. You couldn't do things. Those were unclean. When it came to meat, you couldn't eat pork. You couldn't eat anything that didn't have a cloven hoof and chew the cud. It had to do both at the same time. So there were dietary laws, and it says that they were symbolic. They were shadows of something to come. And yet we still have Christians today who are saying, oh, you got to follow the dietary laws of the Old Testament. And they will condemn people and say that God gave these for health reasons, and so you can't eat pork and you can't eat shellfish and things like that. Over in 1 Timothy chapter 4, it says that in the latter days people will depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. And then it lists what some of those doctrines of devils are. Forbidding to marry, which there's entire denominations, the Catholic Church and others won't let priests marry. It says that that's a doctrine of the devil. And it also goes on to say, and forbidding to eat certain meats, which God has created to be received with thanksgiving of them that believe and know the truth. Under the Old Testament law, you had dietary laws about meats. Under the New Testament, it says it's a doctrine of the devil if you try and tell people that they can't eat pork and eat certain things like that. Boy, that just rubs a lot of people the wrong way, but that's exactly what 1 Timothy chapter 4 is talking about. It's a doctrine of the devil. Everything, you can eat all of those things. Matter of fact, God gave Peter a dream, a trance, and he saw this sheet come down from heaven that had all kinds of animals in it, and some of them were unclean animals according to the Old Testament law. And God told Peter to rise and eat, and Peter said, no, I can't do it because these are unclean animals. And God says, never say that what I've cleansed is unclean. You rise and eat. There is a difference between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And anyway, I hadn't got time to go further into that, but most people understand this. Most Christians understand this. Most Christians will eat bacon, and that was forbidden under the Old Covenant. And they say, well, we've been set free from that. I agree. The next thing it lists here in verse 16 says, don't let them judge you in drink. Did you know that there were dietary laws about what you could drink? Most people don't even know what those are, so apparently you don't feel like you're under those. And then it goes on to say, or in respect of an holy day. Did you know that there were 3 feasts every year that every male Jew had to attend? And then there was other feasts that you had to go through and you had to observe these, and it says it was supposed to be observed forever. Under the New Covenant, we don't observe them. Like, for instance, the Passover, it says that Jesus is our Passover who is sacrificed for us. I think that's 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Jesus is our Passover. So now when we observe Jesus, when we take communion, that is the New Testament equivalent of the Old Testament Passover. We don't have to do that. That was just a picture of what Jesus was going to provide. Now we're dealing in the reality and not in the shadow and the type of it. And I think that most people would agree with that. And then it says, or of the new moon. Did you know that there were laws that you had to offer a sacrifice every new moon? Most Christians today don't do that. Most of you don't even know when the last new moon was. You don't even think about this. So here's 5 things listed. The first 4, the church as a whole has accepted that we are not doing those things. Those were only Old Testament shadows that gave us an indication of what the New Testament reality was like. But now that we have the New Covenant, we don't live in those shadows anymore. And I agree. The 5th thing it lists is it says Sabbath days. Did you know that there's entire denominations like the Seventh-day Adventists and others that still proclaim that you have to observe the Sabbath day? It's one of the 10 Commandments to remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. And there were judgments against people who didn't keep the Sabbath. And there are Christians today that still believe you've got to observe the Sabbath day. Did you know that the Sabbath is not Sunday? In the Jewish way of thinking, the Sabbath started Friday at sunset till Saturday at sunset. That's the Sabbath. But we aren't even under that because this says that it was just a shadow. How could you take Colossians chapter 2, verse 16, and say we're redeemed from 4 of those things? Those were only shadows, but the Sabbath, you still have to keep it. No, verse 16 put all 5 of those things in the same category, saying that they were all shadows of something that's to come. You know what the Sabbath pictured? It pictured this Sabbath rest that is talked about in Hebrews chapter 4. In the same way that Jesus rested on the 7th day, not because He was tired, but because it was complete. Likewise, there is now a rest for the people of God to where we enter into the finished, complete work of what Jesus has done. We don't have to get Him to heal us, to deliver us, to prosper us. It's already been done. We just draw out the things that He's already provided, and we rest in what He has done instead of working, trying to get Him to do something for us. And this is what the Sabbath pictured. Did you know when the Lord instituted the Sabbath? Think of this. When the Jews first started observing the Sabbath, nobody observed the Sabbath in the earth. People had to work 7 days a week, and they didn't work just 8 hours a day. They worked from sunrise till sunset, 7 days a week, trying to claw, scratch a living out of the ground and to do the things that they were doing. And here come the Jews who just take 1 day out of 7 off. There is no way that they could prosper if they worked 1/7 less than everybody else in the world. But yet, because they were doing it to God, God blessed their work so that the Jews prospered and had more abundance than the people that were working 7 days a week, all day long, from sunrise to sunset. It was a picture of, even though they were working and they were planting crops, it was really their faith that was producing the benefit, and they could prove it by taking 1 day out of 7 off. They were resting in God and not just trusting their own labor. And in case anybody missed that, then you could turn over and read about the Sabbath. And I forget exactly where this is. I know I've got it here in my notes. But anyway, it was over in Leviticus. I think it's chapter 25, if I'm not mistaken. And in Leviticus chapter 25, they not only took 1 day out of 7 off, they took 1 year out of every 7 years off. And they were commanded not to sow their crops in that 7th year, nor to reap anything that just grew of itself. Anything that grew naturally without them planting it, they had to leave that for the poor of the land or for the animals of the field. And they said, if they say, how are we going to survive during the 7th year? God would bless them on the 6th year, so that there would be 3 times a normal harvest that would carry them through the 6th year, through the 7th year, and through the 8th year while they are once again planting their crops. And until they could get them harvested, God would bless them. So if you miss the significance of them trusting God, their rest on the seventh day as being an expression of their trust in God, that God was their source. If you miss that on 1 day out of 7, how could you miss it out of 1 year out of 7 years that they took off, and yet they still prospered? See, this is what the Sabbath was picturing. It really wasn't about taking a day off and God getting mad if you don't do it. It was all about, it was supposed to be that you are trusting in God. When God gave the manna, He told them to only collect it for 6 days. Don't go out on the seventh day. Some people did it, and God got mad at them because they weren't trusting what God said. The Sabbath was a picture of God, I'm working, but it's not my effort that I'm trusting. It's you that I'm trusting. I'm really resting in you. In the same way that you finished everything and you just ended because it was complete, I'm believing that you've provided for me. And so I'm going to prove it. I'm not just going to say it, I'm going to prove it. I'm going to take 1 day out of 7 off, 1 year out of 7 years off, and you are my source. And God would bless them supernaturally. Likewise, this is what Hebrews 4 is all about. There is a Sabbath rest for New Testament believers. That even though you go out and work a job, your faith isn't in you and what you're doing and in your boss. Your faith is really in God. And that job is just the tool. It's just the avenue that He's supplying that through. But your faith is in God. Therefore, you'll stand up and you'll stand for God. You won't deny your faith because God is your source, not that job, not that employer. See, that's the way it's supposed to be. This is why when we give, it's not that God needs our money. We need to express that, God, I'm trusting you as my source. And it's not just words. I'm proving it. I'm going to take a portion of what I've got. There's things that I wished I had and I don't have enough money for it, but you are my source, and to prove it, I'm not just going to say it. I'm taking a portion and I give that to you. This is you resting in the Lord. You need to get to a place to where God is your source. And there's probably some people watching this program who you are saying, oh yes, God is my source. But you won't tithe on a regular basis because you need it. You got something coming up and you just can't let go of that money. You can say what you want to, but you aren't resting in the Lord. You don't really see God as your source. You see that money, that resource that you have as your source, and that's the reason you won't let go. We need to get to where we rest in the Lord. And that doesn't mean we don't study the Word. As it goes on to say in verse 11, Hebrews 4:11, let us labor to enter into that rest. It takes effort to renew your mind and to get to where you can trust the unseen more than you can trust the seen. There is a rest in the Lord, and we have to labor. We have to renew our mind, but we need to get to a place to where we aren't trusting in our own effort. We are trusting in what Jesus has done for us, and we are resting in Him. Man, that's powerful. That's changed my life. I know that would change your life if you could fully understand that. I've got this explained much more. It's not broken up into little 30-minute segments. This is my teaching from my living commentary put into printed form, 223 pages. And then I also have CDs and DVDs as well as a USB that were taken from this television program. So you could get the exact teaching that you were listening to today on these USBs or CDs and DVDs. Please listen to our announcer and then call or write today.
Andrew is pleased to announce the release of his brand new book, Hebrews, Living in the New Covenant Reality. This hardback book includes all of Andrew's personal study notes and commentary on the book of Hebrews as compiled from Andrew's Living Commentary software. Discover the transformative truths of the book of Hebrews when you get Andrew's brand new book, Hebrews, Living in the New Covenant Reality, today. Andrew's complete series, Hebrews, Living in the New Covenant Reality, is available as a book, CD album, TV, DVD album, and USB made from our daily television broadcast. Each of these valuable resources are available when you contact us. We also want to remind you of Andrew's Living Commentary software. The Living Commentary includes more than 50 years of Andrew's Bible study notes and personal encounters with God, and is available as a web-based software that you can access by computer or any mobile device. Get Andrew's Living Commentary today for $135. Go to our website at awmc.ca to see all the ways you can get these products. Or you can call the Andrew Womack Ministries Canada Helpline Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time at 647-348-2220 to order.
One of the ways that people have been giving is what we call legacy giving. This is an end-of-life gift, and so I would encourage you to check it out. We'll have some information there on the screen, but this is a way of you just continuing your giving. Even after you've gone to be with the Lord, you can still be a blessing to all of the people that we're ministering to. So check out the information on the screen and become a part of our legacy giving today.
All right, so in the name of Jesus, here we go. 1, 2, 3. We have officially broke ground. Praise God.
Thanks to the support of our friends and partners, Andrew has continued the expansion of our Charis Bible College campus so that we can raise up more disciples to take the gospel further and deeper than ever before. Because you play such an important role in raising up this next generation, Andrew has decided to give monthly construction updates so that you can see the progress of what your giving and prayers have produced. Visit awmi.net/Charis Campus to see our most recent update today.
Man, I appreciate you guys taking the time to check out Army, check out the benefits. As a member of Army, you become part of Andrew's big army of ministers that are ministering with him, and we're mobilizing people around the Word and the direction that God gives Andrew. Plus, you get Andrew's live Bible commentary. Then we also get 4 Charis Bible College courses per year. We can do more together than we can individually and on our own.
And I tell you, encouragement is something that is hard for ministers to come by, and yet this is what this Army is all about. So the website will give you a lot of the details if you'll check it out, and we would just love for you to be a part of this and receive all of these benefits. We're here to help each other and to get the gospel out.
Amen.
See Jesus glorified.
Amen.
I had no idea that I would be sick for so long, but I remember shaving it thinking like, it's gonna be okay. This is gonna be okay. I'm not gonna be sick like this forever.
At 8 years old, Allison was diagnosed with alopecia universalis, a rare and incurable disease that causes the total loss of hair. She was bald for over a decade until one day she was introduced to a message from Andrew Womack.
And I mean, the light bulb went off like, oh, I don't have to do anything to earn healing. I don't have to fast. I don't have to pray. I don't have to beg. I literally do not even have to ask you. You already healed me. And it was so empowering because I was finally free of this works mentality.
Today, Allison is completely healed, and with a full head of hair, she now inspires others to receive their healing in Christ.